Hi guys, hey, Mr. Bills here. We're going to go over the warm-up that you're going to do before you do your colored pencil drawing. And it's another color wheel, but there's a twist to it. We're going to have it in the shape of a flower, and we're going to let the colors blend between. So let's get right into it. First thing you have to do is take this copy that you have, and just in case, because of this school year, if you don't have a copy of this, you just have to know, and you can trace it right off the computer screen, it is 4 inches across. That's going to make it the right size. Okay, so if you can zoom in and zoom out, and you can put a piece of paper up to your computer screen probably and trace it nice and lightly. But what I did, I took my copy and I just went up to the window in the daylight and just kind of tacked it together a little bit right there and traced it onto a fresh piece of paper. Okay, this can be regular copy paper, it can be Bristol board, it can be cardstock, anything that's white. And I'm going to take this off of there so I can just have that off to the side. Now, what we're going to make sure to trace it lightly. If you trace it kind of dark, erase it so it's light like mine right here. Now, it doesn't matter, and again, because of this school year and our budget and everything, it doesn't matter if you're using Prismacolor or Crayola. They're both, it's both going to be the same, the exact same. So I'm going to use Prismacolor. I've been using Crayola on some other things. And I also want you, just so we don't get kind of messed up, put red, orange, yellow, green, blue, violet, just so you know what colors should go where. They're just the initials like that. All right. So we are, and I'm not going to do this whole thing with you, don't worry. I'm just going to get some of this going. What we're going to try to do is create a flower here that blends. As my red goes over to the orange, it's going to get a little bit lighter. And I completely expect you to use those shading rules that we learned in Art 1 and we practiced a lot. If I see, if I see scribble, that's going to just really bomb your grade. So make sure that you're trying to be nice and smooth with your shading. And I'll give you this little reminder tip. As I'm coloring or shading, I leave a little irregular edge out here. So then when I continue to shade with my little overlapping circles, it blends in much easier. If you go down here and stop right along a hard edge like that, it's not going to blend in as easily for you. Okay, so I'll get this going as fast as I can, and I'll do more of it in hyperspeed, but just this one time, I need to show you how we're going to transition from one color to another. Okay, so out here toward the edge, I'm just barely starting to get a little bit lighter. And I'm going to let that lightness continue over onto the orange area. See, it's just getting lighter and lighter until it fades away pretty quickly. Again, we're not going to have any dark outlines. Just let the color show where the edge is. So you can see here I'm trying to get really soft. Right there, that's too hard of an edge. See that? So I'm going to hold the pencil farther back and try to let it softly fade away to nothing. That's going to allow our orange to get a truly seamless blend into the red. And again, look at my short pencil strokes. I'm trying to kind of float around the area. Remember, you want to work kind of in a spiral, these little circles. So don't go circle, circle, circle in a stripe and then another stripe. Let your pencil kind of float around the page. Now we will do some shading on here in a little bit to help separate these petals. That'll be something that we do toward the end. And also, you might have noticed these little lines, these two little lines. We're going to try to get that to look like the flower petals might get kind of squished as it goes into the center of the flower. in order to do that, and again, this is a matter of controlling your values, we are going to let a little darker fuzzy little finger gonna just go right where that line was. Please do not just draw a line right there, because we want right here to have this little undulation, making it look like it gradually gets lighter and darker. So I'm going to draw that and then let it try to be a little bit hazy and fuzzy on both sides of that. And we'll do this on every one. So it's not just a color wheel. We're really trying to capture some sense of form in here. And I'm going to do a little coloring in between. This is going to be kind of a highlight in between them, in between those two little, we'll call them fingers sticking up. So I'll do this carefully. Then over here it's going to be kind of another little highlight right there. This red can also go over here into the violet, and that can, again, fade away, completely fade, 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 well before it gets to halfway. So that'll be nice and soft. Up here, where it's farther away from the petal, I can keep it kind of rich and red, but when we get down here closer to the next petal, that's where I want to start to let it get lighter. And up here I can let it have a little bit of a richer red tone where it's farther away from the other colors. Okay, now be patient with me here. I need to show you how we're going to deal with one color blending into another. So I had to let this get a little bit lighter down here in order for those two little creases, those little, we'll call them, like I said, fuzzy fingers, to help get that to look like it might have a little bend or a wrinkle down here. Right, now I'm going to take the orange and I'm going to start really dark with the orange right here. And then when I go toward the red, I'm going to let the orange stay pretty dark for a while. And let's get it all the way up to the top. And since that red faded away, the red and the orange will just seamlessly blend into each other. And when I get down here toward the area where these two meet, I'm going to make sure this orange hits the red as well. So let's do that in just a second here. So now I'm going to go over here and I want these two to blend into each other. Now I'm going to try to leave just the littlest bit of a lighter spot, that kind of that idea of reflected light that we talked about in Art 1. That little lighter edge at the edge of that petal, so these two don't blend into each other all the way completely. And again, down here we're going to try to go darker with that orange on our two little fingers. I'm probably going to have to use a darker color on there, so maybe some red right there to help that little wrinkle happen at the bottom. So we have to think about several things when you do this. It's not just coloring in. You want to think about capturing form. Okay, now I'm going to let the orange jump over here a little bit toward the yellow and let the orange just be really soft over here, and do the same thing with the yellow. Over here I'm going to let the red fade away and use violet to let it blend into the red. So you'll see how that works in time lapse, but just know that that's what the idea is. And here, let's check this out. Let's get a little bit of red right in there to make that wrinkle a little darker. And I say we're gonna. Remember, violet is our color that we can be sneaky with. Now, see this little spot right here between these two petals? I'm going to just barely hit it with a little bit of violet. Going to draw that line first real carefully, and then as quickly and as softly as I can, let it fade away. If you wanted to use brown, since brown kind of has it kind of blends with orange nicely. See, I didn't press very hard, and it was just enough to let those two petals separate from each other. And I'm going to put a little bit of violet in that little wrinkle right there too. Maybe a little bit of violet in this one too. All these little decisions are fine to make. If you need to make something darker, many times you need a darker color. Don't just press harder with the same color, but you need a color that's darker. Remember, that's why I put some red on there first, because red's kind of a darker color compared to orange. So we're going to start to separate these petals as well. And again, we're trying to capture those little highlights in between the little wrinkles on each of the petals, so we can make it look like it kind of has that idea that they're getting squished down in there behind there. All right, so check it out as I do the rest in time lapse, and then we'll come back and talk at the end. Bye. All right, here we go. As I finish up this last petal, I can kind of point out some things you might have noticed while I was doing my coloring. First thing is that each color that you apply has a definite strong part, and it fades away in both directions, so the next colors can also fade into it. And if you notice that during that hyperspeed or time lapse, I would grab other colors once in a while and go in and make some dark areas so I could then go light right up next to it. Because if you go too dark with your light areas, it does not allow the dark areas to look dark. So to capture the sense that these petals are kind of overlapping each other, you need to get in there with those slightly darker bits. And again, violet is a good color to use for your darker bits. Anywhere over on the reds, blues, and greens kind of area. Over here, we're in the yellow and the yellow-green, you might want to use a red or a darker green. Violet may not, since violet is the opposite color of yellow, you may not want to use that. It'll kind of dull things out a little bit. I'm almost through with this one. Then we'll go over how to finish a few things off. We'll talk about the middle and a little trick you can use that you used in Art 1 a little bit, but maybe you forgot about it. And again, we're trying to make sure that these little spikes, those little fingers, have a good dark quality, but they also have a little bit of a fuzzy quality. So this little assignment is a good assignment, not just to get used to blending colors together again, but we're trying to capture that kind of that sense of form where these parts overlap each other, and they and the inside of these petals each have a little undulation. They're kind of getting squeezed underneath there. And then the way to make those little undulations look soft, you just have to make sure that you use your soft touch on either side of that little spike, that little finger right there. Okay, so there's another thing that you can do to kind of help make this have more of a form appearance, and that's around this circle that we're going to deal with in just a moment. We need to make sure excuse me, that it's a little bit darker right around, whoop, I don't want to put green on that one. Let's use a little bit of red right there, just a little bit darker, and some of that darkness can kind of just blend up into those little fingers right there. And make sure that the edge of the petal that is on top has a little bit of a lighter glow right there, and it's a little bit darker right next to it, with a color that kind of goes with the color that's part of the petal. All right, another thing you can do, and we can do this on the center part also, we can use a white pencil to kind of make the lighter tones look just as kind of rich and thick as the rest of it. And boy, I hope you can see that. It's just that there's a little bit of a texture sometimes when you go soft with the colored pencil. And again, this does not fix sloppy shading. And out here, where the red gets darker, I'm going very soft with the white pencil. And a little bit firmer on the soft area of red. And a little bit softer out here where the red is already dark. So that gives it kind of that rich, thick kind of feel to it. I'm going to clean this off just a little bit so I don't, and I'll do it one more time over here where the red and the violet blend into each other. And especially down here where it gets a little bit lighter. This sometimes will make the color a shade darker, because it kind of messes around with it. It smushes it, it blends it, it compacts it. Now out here, again, I'm going to go a little bit softer with the white because I don't want to make, I already pressed hard out here. So it makes it appear that we had this color, this lighter violet color, and we pushed hard with it. I think you can see the difference in texture a little bit. So I'm not going to do all that right now. I'll do it later and then have a picture of it on the slideshow. Now this little center part, we're going to make that look like a ball. So just like we did, where's my scratch paper? Just like we did in Art 1, and we had a ball, and we did some shading, and we had a highlight, and we had reflected light. We're going to do that kind of thing here, but with neutral tones. The neutral tones we're going to use are just brown, and we have a couple different browns, and we can use a little bit of black in there as well. These are sharp enough. So I'm going to start with a little bit of the lighter brown, the sienna brown that we have in that pack. Or if we're using Crayola color pencils, there's a lighter brown color in that too. Or if you only have one brown, just press lightly. Now we also have to kind of imagine a light coming in, okay, and a highlight kind of that leans toward the light. So as an artist, you need to kind of get used to creating the sense of light. And I'm going to keep it kind of light out here too, because I'm going to go darker even out here eventually, because we want this ball to really look like it's on top of these petals. And as I start to go over here toward the highlight, and you can't draw it, you have to just picture it. I'm going to do a little bit of brown over here. So the highlight is not on the edge of this ball, this sphere. The highlight is off the edge a little bit. So that's kind of soft. And again, I'm using lots of little circles. I'm getting lighter as I move in toward the highlight area. And the highlight should be off center. Okay, don't make it right in the middle. It's going to have a little bit more of a dynamic look if that happens. Plus, when we make that highlight a little bit off center, we're going to create kind of a shadow effect over here. And we'll do that next. All right, I'm going to add a little more of the darker brown. I'm going to add some white on here. I'll do it in time lapse, and it'll just take me a few seconds as far as that goes, and we'll be right back with you. All right, now that I finished that little sphere, and again I did some of the light brown color, letting it really get soft and fuzzy and around that highlight. Then I went with some darker brown to get the core shadow. And that core shadow is, remember, that darker part in between the highlight and the reflected light on the outer edge over here. And then I took some white, made sure it was nice and clean. I started in the middle and kind of worked my way out, and then kind of went back and forth and tried to get that to be fairly smooth looking. But what's happening here is on this side, there's some nice contrast going on. That little sphere is kind of popping off the page. It's looking like these petals are kind of going underneath there. Where over here, it's not quite the same. And since it's not, you don't have that little shadow effect over here, our reflected light isn't standing out very much. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually, right up here, I'm going to add a little more red and let it fade away. Just a little more to help make that. And as I fade away, I'm trying to let it blend into these little spikes, these little fingers. Then I can add a little more. There's a little empty spot right there. A little more right there. And what this is doing is cleaning up the edge of the sphere, for one thing. Okay, now I can take some orange on top of this yellow one, and I've done it a little bit, but I think I might even have to go darker to help that shadow. Now over here, I'm going to get more of a shadow, more of a little bit of a defined shadow to help make it look like that highlight is really bouncing off of that light and making a shadow, just like you see the shadow of my finger right here on this side. As I put my finger down from my lamp, I'll go up to the side. I'm going to use some brown, because I like how brown and orange kind of mix, and it helps make the orange look darker, but in a natural way. So check out this little edge I'm making, and then letting it kind of fade and bleed and blend into those little spikes right there. Okay, and I'm going to make this stay darker a little bit longer because of that shadow effect. Let it fade off right there. Now I'm going to switch over to green. Actually, I have plenty of green in there. I'm going to switch over to violet, because I'm going to remember, violet is that color that you can use sometimes to make things look darker, but they still have a sense of color. Black will just cover up the color, where violet has a nice sense that there's still some color under there, because there's the red and the blue in violet. So that's just on this petal. And even though I say it's a cast shadow, I'm not going to give it a hard edge out here. I'm still going to let it have, it's going to kind of have some shape. I'm going to put a little bit right here too. It's going to kind of have a shape to it, but it's going to be kind of soft out here as well. All right, so let's go right up. It's almost like I'm outlining this sphere and then letting that kind of fade away a little bit, but emphasizing it more where that shadow would happen. And here I go again, kind of outlining it, but making sure that outline is connected to the shading that I let it fade away here. So hang in there. This one would be through in 2 seconds if I did it in time lapse, so I'm going to just kind of keep doing it. As I come over here, I'm going to let this shadow get skinnier and skinnier, because that's what would happen with a cast shadow of a sphere. It would kind of disappear over here. It would kind of go just from about here, get a little bit bigger, then get smaller again over here. So that's what I'm thinking about here. All of this with violet, especially over here in the blues and the greens and the violet tones. And here, hopefully you can remember what it looked like a minute ago, where this is kind of popping off the page more now. And again, if I want to, I can put a little bit of white in there to give it that little bit of a smoother texture. I'm not pressing really hard, just enough to kind of make it blend into the what's behind it. So you can kind of see a shape to it, but it kind of has a softness as well. All right, so if you can certainly color in your letters. You can color each one its own color. This yellow one, this yellow petal, almost disappears into the white of the page. Come on, get in focus. There we go. So, if you want to, just to help make it stand out, you can put a little more orange around the edge. That was kind of bugging me. You don't have to do this, but that was kind of, just so you can see it a little bit more, and you can take the yellow-green and do the same thing here. I'm going to ask you to try not to let the pencil outline really show. If I see it a little bit, it's no big deal, but don't let it be obviously a dark outline. Let's see, let's do some green down here. And I'm going to do yellow and a little bit of yellow and green here. There's my yellow. Again, this is not really part of your grade, but if you want to color in your letters, that's totally fine. I should be able to tell what colors you're using, and I still need to do some white blending on this, but I'll take a picture of this. I'm also going to do a few things on a piece of scratch paper that tells you what not to do, and it'll have a couple labels pointing to it, and it'll be pretty obvious what we're looking for, and some things for you to watch out for when you are doing your coloring and shading and blending and so on. All right, that's all there is to this. We'll see you next time. Have a good time with it. And again, these are skills that you're really going to use on your colored pencil assignment. So I'm not just making you do busy work. These are things that you're really going to have to do. You're going to have to kind of make up where some light hits and make up where some shadows are and make up where some overlaps happen and how to achieve those in kind of a realistic representational way. All right, there you go. See ya.